Good evening and welcome to the Mayoral webcast hosted by the Lethbridge Herald and southernalberta.com. My name is Doyle McKinnon, Managing Editor of the Lethbridge Herald. I'm joined tonight by Garrett Simmons, my colleague, and behind the scenes we have Dan Burdesco of southernalberta.com who's running the show. First off, we'd like to thank the four mayoralty candidates for taking the time to join us tonight, as well as you, the viewers. The format tonight is quite simple. We'll be asking the candidates in alphabetical order 4 questions to get the evening started. Then in essence we'll be going to the Twitter feed for questions from you, the viewers. The candidates will be asked to keep their answers to within a minute and a half. And so essentially without further ado, we'll get started with our questions for tonight. And we'll begin with Farron Ellis. Groups like the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, among others, have called for a municipal auditor general, essentially to oversee spending and ensure taxpayers are getting value for their tax dollars. Are you in favor of this or opposed, and why?
It's a good question, Doyle. It's come up a number of times. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business brings this up regularly. I'd look into it, but most of the time we find that these types of building another layer of bureaucracy tend to spend more money than they save. The current financial policies of the city require us to go through, and council directs. I mean, you don't have to. Administration is following those policies, but council also directs administration to go through at each department not only at each budget cycle, but on an ongoing basis throughout the year to seek efficiencies. And there's a long list of efficiencies that they've come up with over the last few years. I mean, just in order to bring the budget of the tax increase required for the most recent budget, the administration started at 4.7% to cover the base. We said not good enough, come back with something lower. They came back with 3.7%. We again said not good enough, come back with something lower. Administration then very reasonably said, why don't we stop this guessing game? What do you guys want? And the mayor and I proposed a resolution to bring in the base in at 2.5%. Part of how that was done was the efficiencies of saving $1 million a year by advancing the LED light replacement, or our light replacement, and putting in LEDs. Everything from park services through forced staff reduction at the sewage treatment plant because we could buy better equipment, monitoring equipment. So these things go on an ongoing basis. What we typically find is that in spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on those, you don't save a lot of money. In the end, you end up spending more than you save.
Okay, thank you. Bridget,
thank
same
you.
question to you.
Thank you. This is a great question, and certainly something we've heard has come up before, and CFIB has brought this up before. I think it's always worthy of discussion. I think it's absolutely valid that we would take a look at something like that, but I also believe that we do have an audit committee in place. What I'd like to see how to change that would be perhaps adding a member of the public or two on that committee to open that up so there is more transparency and comfort level with our citizens. That being said, it really is about finding the best value for our citizens. There are ways that we can do that. One of the things that the City of Lethbridge is a part of right now is the benchmarking initiative, which is one of 14 municipalities across the province that are looking at how delivery service is being done in other municipalities and who's bringing the best bang for the buck, so that we can see and compare how we are delivering services to the way other municipalities are and who are doing it the most efficient ways. I think many of the municipalities are recognizing that the delivery of service continues to cost, the costs are rising, and the taxpayers' ability to pay for that obviously isn't. So we have to make sure that we're as efficient as we are. So although the Municipal Auditor General's purpose would look at something like that, there is things that we can do internally that we should be doing as a council, and we are.
Okay, same question to you.
Yeah, again, great question. The transparency of the city operation is absolutely essential, obviously. We need to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward to show the public that we are being as transparent as possible. If it came down to it and we needed an auditor general, then I don't think that council is doing their job. I think that we have the duty to show as much as possible and get community involvement, get citizen involvement to make sure that they're following the process, that they understand the process, and that they know that we can actually provide the financial information that they need, that we're spending their tax dollars the way that they should be. Efficiencies in City Hall are a great concern for a lot of groups that I've talked to, and that might be the best way to approach this, is to get an efficiency expert through City Hall and through every layer of City Hall to make sure that we're spending our money properly in the right departments, and making sure that if there's transference that needs to happen within City Hall, to make sure that everybody is doing their fair share, that we're getting proper bang for our buck, then that might be the way to go.
Thank you. Chris, to you.
Yep. Thank you very much. I think the main responsibility for the financial performance of the city belongs with your elected representatives. And you have to elect people who can ask good questions. I've had 38 years of business experience. My job has involved overseeing millions of dollars in operating budgets. When I had 18 years experience on the Catholic School Board, I suggested forming an audit committee when I was first elected in 1992. I served on the audit committee every year. We had to deal with things like enrollment reductions. As the enrollment went down, we had to adjust the budget accordingly. I'm used to having to make tough decisions. I think the way the city has to work on this, the idea of a value for money audit has been suggested. I think the new council will have to decide if that's a way that they want to go. People are concerned about the increasing number of employees at City Hall. Are we going to head down the road towards Detroit, or are we going to be able to manage our systems and our finances accordingly? So we do have people in our city, a significant proportion of our city are on limited incomes, cannot afford significant tax increases, and I think it's incumbent on the people that you elect to make sure that we are getting value for money, and we have to explore the different possibilities and options for doing that. So we'll look at, the new council will look at value for money audit. I'm open to that idea, haven't made a firm decision on that, but it's very important that your elected council represents the needs and wishes of the people who voted them in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. For our next question, we'll start with you, Bridget. Given the city's growth and with a population that's edging towards 100,000 people, do you think that for 2017, the next round of civic elections, that we should be looking at electing full-time city councillors?
Absolutely. This is a great question and something I firmly believe in. One thing that we're finding is a lot of the councillors that we have on council now are really doing close to full-time work as it is. We have a large operating budget. We have an active committee roster that I'm personally on 11 committees. In order us to be engaged and informed to make good decisions, it's important that we have the time to be able to do that. So I absolutely would support a full-time council. I think you'll get better councillors as a result of it, and people who are doing that work, that expectation will be of them to do that work, and then you can judge them accordingly. I think right now there's an expectation that our councillors will be working full-time, and certainly we're expecting full-time results from them, but we're really can only judge them on a part-time, considering that's what we're expecting from them. So the expectation and the evaluation has to match. And I think once we go to a full-time council, we can all hold everybody to that same level, and you won't see such a varying degree in how people are approaching a position.
Thank you. Curtis, your position on that?
Pretty much the same. I have seen direct hand how our city councillors are working full-time between their committee work, their travel. It is a full-time position. Definitely we should be looking at full-time councillors for the amount of workload that's being put on them. I would take it one step further, that we should actually be looking at electing through a ward system as well, so that those councillors are directly responsible for their part of the city. It works very well in larger centres, and we're becoming those a larger centre as well. So I think that, city councillors that work full-time are responsible for specific wards. We're going to see a lot more out of them. We're going to see a lot better representation from our councillors.
Thank you. Chris, yourself.
For me, the jury's out on that. I'm willing to take a look at it, but I'm not convinced that we need full-time councillors at this point. Lethbridge is a relatively small city, 90,000 people. I guess in my service with the Holy Spirit School Board for 18 years, we had 9 trustees on that board. I think one thing that was very important was we had to walk the fine line of being involved in our schools, being knowledgeable. understanding the issues, understanding the people that we represented, but we needed to be careful that we didn't get involved in administration of the system. Our job was governance. So we need to make sure that we maintained accountability, that we basically could go back and say that we were getting the best value for our education dollar, that every child is being served, and we need to, at City Hall, I think, we need to make sure that when we elect people, that they're there for a governance role, and that they don't get involved in administration. If people have too much time on their hands, there is that temptation.
Thank you. Baron?
Thanks. There are a lot of issues involved in this. If you're going to have the expectation to be a full-time counselor, you're going to have to provide full-time pay. So people proposing full-time counselors better get ready for a rather protracted debate about what that pay is going to be. Even if you think about paying full-time counselors the equivalent of a senior high school teacher or a Lethbridge Regional Police officer who's been on the job for a couple of years, you're talking in the $90,000 range, plus the benefits and the other associated costs. Then you are going to need support staff. Right now, all of City Council shares one support staff person. We have access to others, but you're going to need some dedicated support staff people. You're going to need some greater office space for those support staff people. So there are a lot of costs that go along with it. If you don't pay properly, you're going to limit your candidate pool to the independently wealthy or the retired. Right? You're not going to get professionals from the community running for office, and that's a serious concern. It likely will come at some point and likely will be associated with the debate about award system. And there is a resolution on the books that says once we get to 100,000 people, we will discuss that. One thing I want to make sure is that when we start making fundamental changes to the representative system of government, you got to ask the people. At some point, the people have to consent through a plebiscite to the plan. Yay or nay, do you want to go down this road?
Okay, thank you. Curtis, for the next question, we'll start with you. If there was one thing that you could accomplish in the next 4 years of leading the city, what would that be, and why do you think it's of paramount importance?
That's an easy one for me. I think the transportation system in Lethbridge needs a good overhaul before we hit that 100,000 people mark. The transit system right now is inconsistent, inconvenient. We need to update it to a more modern system, GPS orientated, something that people can rely on, a tele-ride kind of system. If that happens, the university, the college have already bought in that they will be, supplying the students. We're getting students more active transit. So we need to take that initiative. We need to provide the service so that the students in this town have something to ride and can rely on it. Right now, when you try to park at the university, everybody knows it's an absolute nightmare. Everybody drives to there, but they don't want to. And the reason that they are doing it is because that system's not in place. And this is part of the attraction of getting people to come to our post-secondary institutions, is being able to provide service for them. So I think that would be one of our major hurdles to accomplish right away.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
My number one priority is curbside recycling, getting more people involved in the recycling effort in our city. Only 9% of our household waste gets diverted to recycling, and I think that I'm not very proud of that number as a city. I'm proud of Lethbridge, I'm proud of where I live, but almost every other city has curbside recycling. We need to get more people involved. There's not a very effective way to get people living in the downtown area to participate in recycling. They have to go to the extreme south, the extreme north, or to the west side to participate in recycling the way that it's set up presently. I have 10 years experience with an environmental management system, an internationally recognized one, ISO 14001. At the plant where I work, more than 90% of our waste goes into recycling. So I think what we need to do is we need to have examples. We need to provide education. We need to get our citizens involved, and we need to be serious about recycling in our city and make it a priority. So that's my number one priority. Thank you.
Baron, your top priority for a 4-year term?
Top priority is good governance, and that goes to the size and scope of our municipal government. Over the last, before this council, so the decade between 2001 and 2011, and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business has pointed this out. Lethbridge is not unique. Municipal governments have expanded dramatically, much greater than population growth, much greater than economic activity. This is one of the reasons why people's taxes virtually doubled over 10 years. This council has gone a long ways towards curbing that growth. We're still growing, we're still meeting the service demands of a growing community, but we're not growing beyond that. And so good governance for me is to ensure that the municipal government is contained within its appropriate scope of activities, does not attempt to spread itself out beyond what is appropriate, and that we ensure that the costs associated with that are manageable for residents of this city.
Thank you. Bridget.
And my top priority is also finding efficiencies within administration and cost. We know that taxpayers' property tax is a big issue in our city, and it should be. I talked a bit about the benchmarking initiative. That's something that we can use to, once we get that information, we can springboard into reviewing our departments and finding those efficiencies. The municipal services that we provide to our citizens are paramount to quality of life. That's what we do as a government, but we need to be making sure that we're doing it in an efficient way so that there's value for your dollars. And one place that we can do that, and that's would be my first priority, is to looking to make sure that those efficiencies are found, redundancies are found. In the most part, that work has been done, but there's never been an outside opportunity to look at that, and certainly not look at it in the way that this benchmarking initiative talks about. So this, to me, is extremely important. It allows us to, it's data-based, so it's not perception-based, which is important to me. If we're going to be looking at efficiencies, we've got to be looking at what's really happening and not what we think is happening. And this report will allow us to at least get that first step done and take a look at where we can improve.
Okay, thank you. For the final question from us, we'll go to Chris. In an effort to get a little better understanding of who you are as candidates, we'd like you to share perhaps someone you admire and respect, and why that is. Whether that be another politician, whether it be a social activist, whether it be an athlete. We'd like to know who someone is that you admire and why that is.
I guess my personal hero is Nelson Mandela. He was a man who went through great sacrifice through his life. When he had the opportunity to do so, he made fundamental change. He completely changed the value system in his country. He is a recognized icon around the world for having made a significant difference. If you could do that, if you can change the paradigm, if you can get people to believe in a positive nature despite the things that you have personally gone through, I think he's a shining example of someone who basically holds no grudges, believes in his values, and he's a mentor to his whole country. So he's made a significant shift, and South Africa today is not the same South Africa of 25 or 30 years ago. And to be able to do that would be my inspiration. I don't think we need that level of change in Lethbridge, but I think you need an inspirational leader, somebody who has a vision, someone who has a passion for change. I think I bring those aspects, and that's what I do when I read about Nelson Mandela. His example, you have to walk the talk. You have to be the person in the trenches. It's not about photo ops. It's about participating and being a role model to your community, and that's what I would try to do as your mayor.
Thanks, Chris. Farron, who would you cite as someone that you admire and why?
You know, Doyle, usually we start out our responses with good question. That is the toughest question probably that I've heard so far this campaign. There is a long list. I just started going through the Canadian history, and I thought I started with John A. Macdonald and thought, well, I could stop there, but I'll move a few prime ministers down the road. The next second great Prime Minister of Canada, Wilfrid Laurier. And Laurier was a man who was committed to his principles, and he fought his first election as Liberal leader against Sir John, got his clock cleaned over the issue of free trade, but nevertheless stuck to his principles. He realized the limits of the role of the Prime Minister and what he could and couldn't do. So essentially what he did was finish Macdonald's national plan, filled up the country with immigrants. Canada had the largest growth, or the greatest proportion of growth in population of any Western society at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. He finished the MacDonald National Plan that pulled the country together, brought the West fully into Confederation, granted Alberta and Saskatchewan provincehood, albeit with some conditions that were attached to it. And then in his final campaign, returned to some of the basic principles that he stood for and fought another election campaign on those principles. So sticking to principles and getting the job done.
Okay, thank you. Bridget?
The person I admire the most, this is going to absolutely sound corny, and I'm perfectly aware of that, is my mother. So having been raised by a strong woman who actually didn't even graduate from college until I graduated from high school, watching how she took her beliefs and her passions about the city and how she transferred that into a political career and making the difference in lives of people of Lethbridge. I admire her, I respect her, and I even like her, which is fantastic. She's an everyday human being making everyday differences, and I think that's exactly what we all need to strive for. It's great to have these large figureheads and these people who've done amazing things in their lives, but the everyday people do amazing things, and that's exactly what I admire in her.
Okay, thank you. Curtis?
Well, I hate Bridget right now because that's pretty much what my answer is going to be.
Well, now we know it's not me he admires.
Well, sorry, I didn't really hate it. I want to talk a little bit about my grandmother. My grandmother was born here in Lethbridge in 1926. 42 years ago, her husband died, and she's been on her own ever since. But in that time, that very long time of 42 years that she has managed to live on her own, just recently she actually had to go into Legacy Lodge. But I mean, 42 years by yourself, working by yourself, lower income, trying very hard to scratch out a living as a single lady in this town. It's an inspiration that she never gave up, she never faltered, and she keeps going. And it's also an inspiration for me when I look at other people in this town, like single parents, other singles that don't have children, that are scratching out a living in this town. They're very important, and I think that, you know, my grandmother has made that a role model, that we have to look at everybody when we make decisions. We don't just look at the big historic figures.
I want to change my answer to my dad and my wife.
Thank you, Curtis. At this point, we'll turn the questions over to you, the viewers. Garrett, I'll let you get started in that regard, and we'll go in the opposite direction, starting with Chris and move to Curtis.
Well, we have started getting some questions through Twitter, and I'll kind of mix in some Twitter questions with some email questions we've gotten throughout the day. So I'll start with, I guess, the first one about predictably about Golden Key. So if elected, how would you respond to the application by Golden Key or any other company to conduct drilling within Lethbridge city limits?
Thank you, Garrett. I attended the SACPA session last Thursday when Golden Key made their presentation, and I listened to their presentation. They said that they had an obligation to explore the rights because they had purchased those rights from the provincial government, and they had an obligation to the provincial government to continue that exploration process. My solution would be to ask the provincial government through our locally elected representatives to reimburse Golden Key for whatever expenses they have incurred and whatever they have paid, so that they wouldn't feel obliged to drill for oil or begin a fracking process within our city limits. I think it's inappropriate, and I wouldn't encourage that type of exploration. It's very short term, doesn't provide any benefits to the city. These people come in like carpetbaggers, set up, drill, and then leave again. So I think there's too much risk to the environment. It's too close to residential housing on the west side. There's a possibility, if there's sour gas, that they will be flaring. We've had a number of fires in West Lethbridge in recent years. We can't afford that risk. And I don't think it's appropriate that we should have oil exploration within our city limits at some risk to our citizens. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move over to Twitter. We have a question from one of our Twitter followers. Do you believe the gun range should be closed immediately, given the proven threat to public health? And I guess this one shifts over to Curtis.
Loaded question.
Oh.
Obviously, that question went to City Council, was it just last term?
Mm-hmm.
And they decided to not move them and to extend their lease. So we're under a little bit, is that not true?
No.
No, we didn't extend the
No.
lease.
You didn't extend the lease, so the lease is for how many more years?
2016.
2016. So, yeah, it's, number one.
Not 2016, 2036.
Yeah,
Is
I
it
know it's a
2036?
long time.
Okay. Well,
Um,
that's when you wanted to.
Close enough.
Sorry.
Obviously, having a gun range, first, let me preface that by saying it is important. If people are using guns for hunting, it is important that they have an educational facility where they can train and they can practice. I'm all for that. Having one in a residential area, it blows the mind. I think that city councils way back when they started developing the area of the parks down there and the residential above really dropped the ball without, coming up with some plan of moving that area. And obviously we're going to have to deal with it at some point. There's a huge cost associated with that. I understand that. I think I was quoted at around $18 million to move that, and that's difficult. But then it's a big discussion because we have to decide, is that $18 million worth it, or is one person getting shot by a stray bullet worth it? So, it's a big discussion.
Is there an opportunity to speak to that?
Yes.
Are we, okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so a number of things. Obviously, that came before council, and this is a big and an important issue. I was absolutely convinced that there is no public safety risk beyond any other public safety risk. In fact, we've had more people hit in crosswalks than ever in the entire history of the gun range. The fact of the matter is it's quite safe. It's a state-of-the-art facility. In order to even shoot there, you have to be a gun range officer certified. They've done a number of baffling berms, a number of different things that have absolutely proven this facility to be safe within the measure that's considered reasonable. So there's a perception issue, absolutely. That is a problem for sure, but I am completely convinced that the gun range is safe, is being well maintained. It's important to our community. There's about 1,600 members that use it. I would much rather people be training. We also have marksmen that compete at a national level that train there. So this is a very important facility for our citizens. To have a knee-jerk reaction and close it and move it without having all information is, in my opinion, fear-mongering, and it's perfectly safe.
Well, and on this, if I may, since it was my resolution twice to advance the closure and moving it out of the city, Curtis, you're right. The previous city councils, in my opinion, did make some errors. That gun range was actually further north, and in 2001, the last council meeting right before the election, they extended the lease for another 25 years. So it would have expired in 2016. So the original council had some vision, right? Lethbridge would be built out to that stage by 2016, time to move along. It was the council that made the decision to not only move it back further in, but also extend the lease. When it comes to risk tolerance, Bridget, yes, when there are problems such as crosswalks, when you know there is a risk, you do something about it. You don't just say throw up your hands and
You
say
don't
that
close
there's
the
risk in
crosswalks.
society.
People use crosswalks
You put in lights. You do everything you can to minimize
which
the risk.
is exactly what they've done.
Well, no, because when you have bullets that leave the range, even under the conditions.
What about the 9 on the west side?
The new supervised conditions, even under with all the improvements that we brought in for safety, you have bullets that you have verifiable proof, not only affidavits, but the ballistics reports and a residence where a bullet leaves the range and enters their living quarters. That exceeds my risk tolerance, and I would advance it to the 2016. There will be some costs, but it won't be the $16 million, because that proposal was going to build a massive amount of facilities don't even currently exist, including an indoor range.
We'll stop you right there.
Chris?
Is it right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I took the opportunity to go down and tour the gun range. I talked with the people there. I learned about the improvements that have been made, about the additional security that's been put into place. And I agree that the gun range has to be in its current condition, in its current location, until something else can be found that is cost effective. I'm impressed with the training that's done. I'm impressed with the annual certification, the constant reinforcement of safety issues. There were 2 bullets that left the range in the last recent history. One was an accidental misfire by someone who was inappropriately using their gun, and that circumstance has been explained to the members. Basically, the whole process for loading and checking jammed guns has been reinforced, and that type of training will take place every year. We can't have people out in the country firing weapons randomly because there is no gun range to use that's convenient. So we have to provide a service, and we have to look at the options on a regular basis. We have to work with the Fish and Game Associations and see what the future can hold. But we have to come up with something that's fair to the taxpayers, and we have to come up with something that's fair to the people using the gun range to maintain safety and security for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, and my apologies, I'll give everyone else a chance to respond to the Golden Key question as
Okay.
well. I guess start with Curtis, I guess, and give your response.
Obviously, I think that this is one issue that has Lethbridge altogether. We don't want drilling within city limits, and I think it's the responsibility of City Council and of the mayor to lead that charge and make sure that we have the largest lobby group against it happening as soon as possible. We need a public relations campaign from the city. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit expensive to lobby that way to our government, but what it costs to the city if we don't do it, what it costs to our development if we actually have these wells in the city limits. So I really think it's our responsibility to be the leader of that lobby group and make sure that this does not happen.
Obviously, being the member of council that also voted not to, or have the resolution not to allow drilling in city limits, so obviously I still support that. But I do want to talk about that piece and how the mayor piece fits into this, because one of the responsibilities of the mayor is to be an advocate for the citizens of the city. And those are the skills that I believe I have to be able to do that. So although we don't have the ultimate authority to decide whether or not this drilling happens, we do have the ability for our mayor to be advocating on behalf of our citizens and having a strong voice moving forward. We have to be diligent about putting barriers in place that we do have available to us, but at the end of the day, it really isn't our decision. But making sure that our position is well known to everyone involved is an important piece.
Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you. Well, I know the first thing I wouldn't do, and that is run around calling legitimate businesses carpetbaggers. I mean, they are operating within the rules of the Alberta government, and we need to address those rules. The problem isn't so much the safety of drilling. I mean, there are wells within municipal limits, municipal boundaries throughout this province. Medicine Hat's got 250 of them. If there were ongoing and extreme safety concerns, you'd see these things blowing up regularly. Okay? But you do have to make them safe, and this is where the costs come in for the city. Given horizontal drilling, they could drill outside of the city limits and get to that oil, if indeed it does exist, down there without incurring long-term ongoing costs for the city. The problem for the city is when we go to develop that land, we have to have safety easements. We have to sterilize certain pieces of land. When you're going to plan a new subdivision, you have to get around pipelines, and it's just not optimal. So essentially what happens is the economic benefits go to the oil company, yet the costs go to the residents of the city down the road. Definitely, we have to work with the provincial government, and the provincial government has shown some, at least some indication that they will reconsider some of these matters, because Lethbridge is not the only city that's going through this.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll go back to email for the next question, and we'll start with Bridget. Are you in favor of creating a more attractive tax structure in the downtown core in order to get the developers to build apartment buildings in that location and create a better business climate in the inner core?
So this goes back to the revitalization of downtown and having a vibrant downtown. Absolutely support that principle. I think it's very important. It's the heart of our city. The only way that we'll have a downtown that's vibrant is to make sure that we have a mix of residential, commercial, as well as a cultural component. All three of those are very important to bring vibrancy to downtown. I wouldn't be opposed to looking at it, but I would want more information. I'm not sure what that would look like. I can't just blanket offer support on something, but in order for there to be a vibrancy, we have to look at getting residential in that area. Also supporting what does happen down there, whether it's through land use bylaws or whether it's through zoning, making sure that we do have a good mix of different things so that it brings that joie de vivre, I guess, into that area.
Okay. Mr. Ellis?
We're talking about low-cost housing. Yes, there is room through provincial money flow through the city to support residential downtown. But when you're talking about people's private homes, there is no logical reason that I can think of for the taxpayers to subsidize $500,000 or $750,000 condos downtown when they're not doing the same for other residents in other areas of the city. So as important as downtown is and as vibrant as we want to make it, I can't imagine a scenario where I'll be providing subsidies to people in order to build what will be. And the reason, they will be costly. The reason that we don't have that type of development downtown with a lot of condominiums is because of the cost. The cost per square foot is triple, sometimes quadruple, sometimes more what it costs to build a single-family home or a multifamily home and apartment in other parts of the city. So, providing taxpayer subsidies for people to build some of the most expensive homes in the city is just a non-starter with me.
Mr. Spearman, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I'm open to working with developers to come up with a creative plan for downtown, and that may involve some form of incentives. I guess I'm concerned that downtown, we have some positive things happening in terms of basically refinishing some of our older buildings, the Heart of the City program. We've seen the CASA development downtown, but we still have a lot of land. I think it's unfortunate that the First Avenue property got sold, for example, and maybe is not realizing the potential that we would have wanted as a group. I don't blame the buyers, but I think we have some valuable properties downtown. We have some empty lots. We have some buildings that have been boarded up for a long time. How can we get that moving a little bit faster? How can we create a downtown that all our citizens are proud of, all our citizens want to be part of? How can we have something like Gastown in Vancouver, or Georgetown or George Street in St. John's, Newfoundland, or historic properties in Halifax? How can we have that vibrancy, that alive downtown that people can be proud of? And when we have visitors come to our city, we spend our time downtown. So I think it does involve having residential spaces downtown. It does involve adding to the retail component of downtown to attract people there. And we'll have to come up with a plan. I don't think we've accomplished a whole lot in the last 3 years, and I think it needs to be my second priority if I'm elected as your mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, downtown revitalization is absolutely key. We need to get more residentials down there. We need to get the home builders on board for actually being involved with these projects. One of the ways that I've seen in other cities is Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton. They do cooperative kind of things with the government where you assign a few floors to affordable housing or low-income housing. So you get the grant money coming in to kickstart a project. The builder can build up beyond that. They could sell to medium to luxury condos. Down below, you can put in retail. But those are like thinking out of the box solutions. We need to start looking at more of those. We need to think about the businesses that are already there and how we can support them. But we also need to make sure that they're getting enough traffic going through. Is there a good transit system to bring people downtown? Because if people can't get downtown on their own, they're not going to come there. So it's all of those are coming into play. But definitely we do need to look at some sort of revitalization. And I don't know if it's necessarily city tax breaks, but increasing the vibrancy and the attractiveness of a downtown definitely will add to all that.
Perfect. Okay, we will head back to Twitter. We have a question about, I guess, Lethbridge's future. 2017 is Canada's 150th birthday. If mayor, what legacy do you want to leave for Lethbridge, Southwest Alberta, and Canada? Mr. Ellis, the floor is yours.
Again, the legacy would be a well-governed city that is affordable and has the quality of life that we currently have enhanced. I mean, we've got a large number of recreation and culture facilities that are on the books, some of them being built as we speak, some of them just recently opened. Should the federal government decide that its books are in the good enough shape that it decides that a legacy fund is out there, I'm pretty convinced from what I know about governments it'll have something to do with arts and culture, and that would be a perfect opportunity to get a rather sizable amount of grant money to kickstart a performing arts center. There will be other opportunities both in culture and likely recreation, so work with the federal government to ensure that we are in a fiscal position, as well as we have the capacity to take advantage of the programs that the federal government will likely come up with.
Perfect. We'll move on to Mr. Spearman.
Thank you very much, Garrett. I guess there might be that opportunity, and we can hope for funding from another level of government, or we can try to help ourselves. In My experience in the community, I've worked with organizations like the Rehabilitation Society of Southwestern Alberta, it's now the Ability Resource Centre. I've worked with Aboriginal Housing Society, and we have done things to help ourselves. We have to have an entrepreneurial spirit. That means we have to look like we're winners. We have to have money in the bank ourselves that can be supplemented by whatever funds are available from other levels of government. So it might be matching funds. We can dream big, but we have to provide something that says that we're able to manage our money properly, that we're willing to invest something in our future ourselves. And so if it is something like the Performing Arts Centre, I've suggested within my platform a legacy fund. And that would be started, if I'm elected mayor, in November. I will personally kick off a legacy fund for something like a Performing Arts Centre. And the money comes to those that help themselves, and I think as a community we have to look at that as a priority, and we have to make sure that we have a clear vision for what we want, and that when we come forward, when monies are available, we can supplement whatever monies that we get to make sure we have the best facility that we can provide. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
I think that is a question that we need to take back to the citizens of Lethbridge. What do they want as far as a legacy? What do they want to see? I mean, the Performance Arts Centre, I'm all for it. Let's get it going on. But let's get it going on before that. But there's other things out there. I mean, we have a very, very diverse culture in Southern Alberta. We need to make sure that everybody's represented. And so we need to get out in the street, talk to people, and find out what they want as a legacy for the city of Lethbridge.
Bridget?
So this is a great question. It's going to be a wonderful time in Canada and Southern Alberta, and of course Lethbridge. Last time we had this opportunity, the Nika Yuko was built, and that was one of the legacy programs from the last time we celebrated. So I would anticipate something like that. We've certainly have some worthy projects in our current CIP plan that you could put money towards that. But this really is working with the community. I know that the Galt Museum is doing they're setting up a committee to take a look at this. So they're not waiting for money to fall out of the sky. There are people in our community that are already looking at what we can do to celebrate this time in our history. And absolutely, I think one of the ways that we do celebrate or leave a legacy, it's often something in a capital build. I would anticipate something like that as well.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we will go back to email for the next question. So I'll read this one. Given the fact that there's a significant risk of wildfire existing on the west side as well as possible development of drilling on the west side and all the risks involved with that, do you think now is the time to start visiting the development of another crossing to the east side of Lethbridge, which would provide an alternate route for the future citizens moving into the south end of the west side? So Mr. Spearman, we'll start with you on this one.
That's a very difficult question because of the cost involved. And if we had to build a bridge that the city of Lethbridge had to fund itself, that would really put a strain on our financial resources as a city. And the safety issue, I think we have to address in other ways. It would be cheaper to put in another fire station in West Lethbridge than it would be to put another bridge in. So it's not easy for me to say that. I live in West Lethbridge, and I lived not too far from the fields. My house would be one of the first ones. So, you know, I guess I have to tell you that I'm not going to put my own interests first. The province wants to put in a bridge to the north of the city. They want the Highway 3 to be a bypass around Lethbridge. They want that bridge to come across roughly at Diamond City and go around. The highway would bisect the area between Lethbridge and Coaldale. I don't think we can expect provincial money, and that's what concerns me. This would put a significant financial strain on the taxpayers of Lethbridge, and I'm not sure that all of them would support a third crossing. What are the advantages to having a third crossing in addition to the safety? The safety I think we can control in other ways, but if the justification is to get to the big box stores 5 minutes faster, I can't support that idea. Thank you.
I think that, yeah, when you address the third bridge issue, there's a lot of sides to it, obviously. The safety I'd like to acknowledge, but you look at bigger metropolises that have a lot more people, Vancouver being one, that rely on a lot of people using one bridge to and from certain areas, or two bridges. And that's what we have right now. We have two bridges, and that with adequate fire and safety on the west side, it shouldn't be that big of an issue as far as evacuation plans. It's up for the city to come up with those plans and make sure it's handled in a proper way in those emergency situations. But I think the real issue about the other bridge is convenience and congestion. And we can look at convenience and congestion, like convenience, is it worth the money from the city to convenience our citizens? If possible, if we're a rich city, then absolutely convenience is great. But as it stands right now, it's not a priority. I think congestion is what we really are faced with for a lot of people that commute across those bridges, and they're tired of the congestion, and that again goes back to an adequate transportation system that can relieve some of that congestion.
Bridget, turn it over to you.
So this is definitely something I've heard a lot about, and with the wildfires that certainly amplified the issue. When we looked at this, it was about $150 million to build the bridge. We know that there's no provincial funding available for that. It's not realistic that the city our size, with the base that we have, would be able to fund that. I appreciate the concerns about safety issues, and I think there are other ways that we need to be addressing that, and that needs to be looked at without a doubt. As far as the congestion, that's something that will continue to be a problem for sure, but whether or not it's really a problem, certainly there are certain times during the day it is, but I would argue it's not at the point yet where it would justify a capital build of $150 million. So I appreciate that there is a concern out there, and as far as the safety is concerned, I think we should be looking at that, but as far as congestion, I think we're a ways from that being a real big issue.
Thanks, Garrett. With respect to the specifics of the question, yeah, there are safety issues, and putting another fire hall further south on the west side, which is going to happen eventually anyway, that's not going to address the situation in a catastrophic situation such as we've had. You're throwing all you have at that fire from all stations in the city as much as you can while still having services available. So. Yeah, we need a third bridge. I've been an advocate of a third bridge for quite some time, but it does come down to the cost. About 150, estimates up to 170 now. As time goes on, it's just going to cost more and more. Other cities, Saskatoon's got 7, Vancouver's got many more than 2, by the way.
But I know, but some areas.
Nevertheless, we need a solution for Lethbridge specific. Other cities have different situations. That's up to them. The issue is the funding, and yes, it would be the equivalent of 10 years of what we spend in total on transportation, on new roads, on road maintenance, to build one bridge. So it's quite clear that the city's not going to be able to afford to do this on its own. This is where the province comes in. If the province can fund LRTs in Edmonton and Calgary, when cities such as us, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, Red Deer, that are never going to have LRTs, we need to convince the province that the one-size funding model for transportation doesn't fit every city, and work with the province to get them to change their tune.
Okay, we'll go back to Twitter for a fairly, I guess, open-ended question, but I'll start with you, Curtis. What do you see as the biggest concern for Lethbridge in the next 4 years?
In the next 4 years, biggest concern. Tough one. I think that addressing our social concerns is got to be a priority for us in Lethbridge. We have started working with a lot of agencies and making sure that our homeless population or underhoused populations are being taken care of. But there's still a lot of work to do. There is a very transient society that we need to do some positive work with and make sure that their needs are being taken care of. I've heard a lot of concerns about the downtown core with rising crime and presence there. I think that those concerns need to be addressed. But also I think one of the biggest things that we need to really address is our urban sprawl, because that's adding to our taxation burden.
Mr. Spearman?
I would say the biggest concern we have as citizens is going to be taxes and utilities. Are we going to be able to control our expenses? What we're seeing on the province-wide basis, so the province is doubling the north-south transmission lines. They're using the latest transmission. The cost of building transmission and substations in Alberta is twice what it is in Saskatchewan. Albertans are not getting good value for their money. The projects are being let out at about $290 million a segment, and the finished cost is $400 million a segment. Basically what's happening is the fixed charges on people's bills in the next 5 years are projected to double. How are we going to manage that? Is the city of Lethbridge going to continue to get a 30% return on assets they don't own, the transmission lines and the substations that the province provides? Are we going to be fair to our taxpayers and utility customers? So how are we going to manage those costs for the residents of Lethbridge? Because there's a lot of people in Lethbridge who live on fixed incomes. And we want to make sure those people are able to afford to stay in their homes. And I think that's an issue that this city council is going to have to address. We're addicted to utility revenues, and that can't continue to be the case. You have to elect a mayor and a city council who are going to look at utility revenues and be fair to the citizens of Lethbridge. Thank you.
Mr. Ellis, we'll turn it over to you.
We've got a great city in Lethbridge, and the vast majority of people, I mean, they live here because they love it. People who leave Lethbridge often spend the time they're away doing everything they can to get back to Lethbridge. The vast majority of residents know that. The vast majority of residents also want to improve the city. And so probably the biggest challenge facing the next city council and the mayor who will lead that city council is managing people's expectations. There are a tremendous number of proposals out there, all of them worthy. Some out there that aren't that worthy, but there's a tremendous number that are worthy, and we've seen them come before council in the capital plan and the budget. And the simple reality is we can't afford all of them all at once. We can't overbuild, and borrowing to do so, bringing on a great deal of tax-supported debt is not the answer. So we've got to manage expectations, build what we can afford, when we can afford it, and where it's most appropriate and most efficient.
You have the last word on this one.
Wonderful. So absolutely, we have a fantastic city. We have fantastic residents. Quality of life is one of the things. Our residents care about recreation, they care about culture, they care about infrastructure, and they care about value for taxes. All of those things are going to be important in the next 4 years. 8 out of our top 10 employers are public sector. I'd like to see some economic diversification there. When we see the provincials and federal budgets pulling back, we feel that in Lethbridge, so it's important that we have some diversification. Being able to attract and retain skilled workers. We're not likely going to be able to compete with centres that can offer a higher wage, but what we can offer is quality of life, and that's how we'll be able to retain and attract those workers here. The other thing is value for money. I've talked about it before, making sure that we're finding those efficiencies within our systems so that our citizens can be assured that they're getting good value for their tax dollars.
Okay. All right, we'll go back to the email questions here for a second here, and we'll start with, who did we start with last time? Curtis?
Me.
Oh, so we'll go with Curtis this time to start. I guess we'll start with this one. You are about to become the managing director of a large corporation. How do you satisfy the shareholders of this corporation? The voters, of course.
The voters, of course. Actually, I used this exact comparison the other day. Basically, you are the manager of the shareholders. I've worked directly in corporations. I know how to manage expectations and manage people. So basically, what you need to do, you have to put your best foot forward. You have to be honest. You have to be accountable. You have to be transparent. You have to make sure everybody knows which page you're on right away. As soon as you say to your shareholders, listen, we're hitting a bump right now, but most of the time we don't hear that until the bump is already upon us. So getting people ready for the bump, saying it's coming up around the corner, that's a great thing to do. And I think the citizens of Lethbridge deserve to know when a bump's around the corner. They need to know when something good's coming around the corner too. Like, get the cheers up. Something good might be coming around the corner. Your taxes are going to not be as much as we anticipated. Or your utilities. We've come up with a great solution to make sure your utilities are going to start coming down. We need to make sure that we're telling people this. We need their input. We need to make sure that they've got a say in it. And we need to listen to what that say is.
Chris, we'll go with you next.
Well, I think when you're the mayor or the managing director of a $370 million corporation, I think the most important thing that citizens are looking for is value for money. And they are looking for quality of life. They're looking for someone who engages with them, who looks after their interests, who wants to be part of their success. There are people here with who are part of organizations that have big dreams, that want to add to what we have in Lethbridge. And what I do is I get involved with different organizations. I've done that throughout my life, done that through my school communities. When they build a playground, I get in and help build the playground. When it comes to building my church, I raise the funds for the church. My job is to be a cheerleader for the people here in Lethbridge, make sure that we get good value for money, that I'm not favoring some group over another group, that we treat everyone equally, and that everyone in our city feels that they're being listened to and being heard. Whether they're business people, whether they're retired people, we have a broad range of people in our community. I've had over 33 years of experience in the community at various levels, through my school board experience, through my community experience, and I feel very in touch with the community. I think I'm a good listener, I think I respond to people's ideas, and I want to be part of your success. Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett. I have to engage with the person who sent the question, because we want a more formal definition of what they mean by managing director, but we've got to distinguish between the city manager and make sure that it's important that people understand. We're not electing a city manager, we're electing a mayor. And the proper analogy is that the council acts essentially as the board of directors. So what the mayor's job is to manage that political process as essentially chairman of the board. One vote like all other councillors, but has a very intricate role in working with the administration, working with council, working with the community as they integrate with administration and they interact with administration and the community. And that doesn't mean sitting back and letting administration run the show without any direction. As a matter of fact, it means directing them to bring their best proposals to city council and then critically evaluating them, asking the tough questions, having the ability to analyze them and say some of the stuff just doesn't add up or some of it doesn't make sense. Even if we had all the money in the world, we might not go down this road because it just doesn't make sense. So it is, we need somebody with the political knowledge, with the political experience, as well as other virtues that you can find on my webpage, since I know you're going to give me the hand here in a minute for the 5 seconds. But managing that political process, the last thing you want is politicians, which by their nature are amateurs, meddling in the day-to-day operations of city administration and city management.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great question, and I have heard this confusion in the community before, the difference between being a city manager and being the CEO of a company, which is basically the city manager, and where that vision and direction comes from, and that's from council. So council provides that vision, direction, and gives the city manager the authority to come back and how they're going to execute that. That being said, the mayor is only one vote on council, and it's council that makes decision. But there are 3 other important roles that a mayor plays, and this is where you need to have a mayor who has the ability, who has a well-rounded ability to be a leader, and someone who believes in collaboration, so they're bringing the right people together, someone who believes in engaging the community, because it's the community that has the answers about where our city needs to go and the expertise, and being an advocate for our city outside of our city limits. So when we're talking about things that affect our citizens, we have a strong voice when we phone up the Premier and we say we don't like these post-secondary cuts, and we do it before it happens. These are things that require political knowledge. These are things that require a well-rounded understanding of all business sectors, so profit, not-for-profit, and public sectors, as well as self-employment, all of those that I bring to the table. So it's important that you have a mayor that has all of those things, have a record to stand on, and who understands how to move us forward through that.
Excellent. Well, we have a lot more questions. Wish we had another hour, but that's
Let's do it for another
hour.
Yeah, one more time.
We're just warming up.
That pretty much will wrap up the forum for tonight, and we'd like to thank certainly all the candidates for participating and for their commitment to serving our city. We'd also like to remind viewers to learn more about all the candidates by picking up a copy of the Lethbridge Herald on Wednesday, October 16th, when we'll be putting out our special election edition. And from all of us, we thank you, the viewers, for participating in the forum tonight. And be sure to get out and vote on October 21st. Good night. Thank you very much.